Damn.
Final Gravity. Here we are again. Halfway through block 4. Plato 2 now. Talk a little bit about the history of dark beer. I'm sure we're going to get on some other current event topics as well.
We'll try to keep it on top.
We'll try and keep it to a minimum. But yeah, little history of the dark beer, English, Irish, maybe a little Belgian.
Sure.
Block 2 coming in about a month after Block 1.
Oof. It's been a hell of a time for this. By the way, I think our average is about 7 listeners now. So for the 7 of you
sick.
that listen to this podcast, again, thank you for listening and tuning in when you do.
We appreciate you, 7. You're great. We love you. Thank you for those donations of $1,000 a piece. That's what keeps this podcast running, and we really appreciate it.
You are more important than you know.
I still have yet to see any of that money that you guys keep talking about, this $1,000.
Well, Josh and I have a commission that we take before.
How did you guys get commissioned? This is the.
We just made
it was in the contract we all signed, right?
I
didn't get. How did I miss the contract signing on my own podcast?
I don't know, man. Talk to the lawyer.
I plead the fifth on that.
There's a lawyer?
Oh, yeah, we had a lawyer. We had enough money, after that donation.
Yeah. I really feel like
the manager hired the lawyer.
Right, the manager. We have a manager, too. And a booking agent.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously the booking agent. He's been here since the beginning.
Right. Josh and I are doing shows now, aside from this. Like, we're doing appearances.
The live shows, man. The Drink and Think live shows.
Right, exactly. It'd be great if you showed up and want to be a guest on them. We could let you do that.
Did you say what I think you said?
Well, welcome. It's good to be back. What, you wanted to continue on that riff? Because we can keep going.
No, I don't. Josh capped that out pretty good. I don't have much of a retort for that one. Anyway, dark beer.
Dark beer, hot days. Let's go.
So we talked on Plato 1 about we tasted a couple of different really I thought they were pretty damn good beers. We had the Black Butte, the Old Rasputin.
That Old Rasputin was good. I almost bought another one of those for tonight.
And
that shit was good.
And the Breakside.
What did we have from the Breakside? Oh, we had 2 different ones, didn't we? Josh had like a s'mores one or a salted caramel one.
I had the s'mores variation of it. Yeah.
S'mores variation. Yeah. And we had like a chocolate caramel one or something like that.
No,
both of them were great.
I don't remember the name of it.
I think we just had the barrel-aged version. He had the adjunct version.
Yeah, that's if I remember. I believe that's correct.
Got fucking toasted on the last episode.
That's pretty easy to do with big dark beers. We did not stray too far from the Imperial Stout category.
No.
Which we're doing different tonight over here, Josh. I don't know what you're drinking, but we right now have the Samuel Smith Nut Brown Ale in front of us, which is a classic.
That sounds delicious.
Is a classic.
It's delightful looking.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
Very, very classic brown. A little bit of amber.
It's higher carbonation than an American brown would be, but I'm digging it. I'm really digging it.
Yeah. You poured this a minute ago, and there's still a good amount of head retention hanging out on this.
Tasty.
And the lace around the sides.
I always like the Samuel Smith dark beers, especially like the Christmas ale. It's like one of my favorites. The Toddy Christmas ale is one of my faves. But today I saw the IPA at the store too, Sam Smith IPA, which I didn't have high hopes for, and it did not disappoint in that category. It was not good. But if you can find a Sam Smith's dark beer and it's fresh, it's fucking
really
delightful
good at not
still.
Being good.
Oh, dude, it was.
It's
it's an old school made, English style IPA that's being shipped from a great distance. I was expecting oxidation. What I was not expecting was pure cardboard. It was pure caramel cardboard. It was just not. I mean, I'm not going to say I dumped it down the drain. I continued to analyze it, but it was shitty all the way through.
No suds left behind, man.
Right, that's right. Josh, what are you sipping on?
Are you going to keep making references to that all night,
I
buddy?
went the other direction as you guys. I stuck with the really heavy Imperial dark beers because
good for you.
Dark beer episode. And I was actually going to kind of do the same thing as you guys and stray away from it, but then I saw this sitting on the store shelf, and I decided it was appropriate.
Oh, what a packaging! What a great way to do it. Okay, cool. Dope.
Black is beautiful.
Which brewery is this?
This one was hosted by Weathered Souls Brewing out of San Antonio, Texas.
Dope. Don't even know them.
So this is that beer that like the recipe got put out, and a ton of different breweries are making their version of it, and sending a lot of the proceeds to the fight for racial equity in the country. So,
there's a few in Washington, a few in Seattle, scattered.
A few in Oregon have done it too. This particular can at least happens to be from Weathered Souls out of San Antonio, Texas.
Weathered Souls and everybody else who's doing this, thank you for doing that. Yep. Out of curiosity, as a brewer, because I forgot that we had talked about that last time, is it just packaging that people are doing with that, or can you sell that in your tap room for the proceeds to go to that right thing?
I don't actually know. I haven't seen it on tap anywhere, but
that's something let's look up off screen at some point.
If any one of the 7 people listening has any information,
if you guys have any knowledge, please let me know, because if that's something that we can just do, then I'll brew that beer ASAP. That's a great cause, and I know that everybody on the show stands with racial and, for that matter, gender and sexual equality in this country and in this world. People be people, and
wow.
.
This is delightfully aromatic, and then a lot thinner than I was expecting.
The body is really cut by that carbonation, and it's much drier than I think American brewers would perceive a brown ale to be. It's much, which we're going to get into when we talk about the history of dark beers, because also, if you ever want to call us out on the show, real quick, shameless, just get this book. The Oxford Companion to Beer will tell you everything you want to know. It is historically checked by great beer historians, great brewers, all that shit. I know you have a copy of it. I have a copy of it. I also have a copy of it at the brewery. It's a super great book, but we'll get into some of that information. But yeah, this is a really what I would believe holds true to a very classic style of a northern brown ale.
Yeah,
and it's delicious. Josh, how is Black is Beautiful from Weathered Souls Brewing?
Well, actually, I am reading about it. I think they are kind of the ones who started this beer, actually. Hence why they're distributing it. So,
again, beautiful.
When you were asking questions about it, I went ahead and pulled up the website for the beer. And then there's a whole link for breweries who want to join the cause. So, the Black is Beautiful initiative is a collaborative effort amongst the brewing community and its customers in an attempt to bring awareness to the injustice that many people of color face daily. Our mission is to bridge the gap that's been around for ages and provide a platform to show that the brewing community is an inclusive place for everyone of any color. We are asking for all breweries and brewers far and wide to raise a glass with us in unison and participate in this collaboration. In the collaboration efforts, we would ask the participating breweries to do the following. Donate 100% of the beer's proceeds to local foundations that support police brutality reform and legal defenses for those who have been wronged. Choose their own entity to donate to local organizations that support equality and commit to the long-term work of equality. And then it goes on to talk about Weathered Souls, and what they're doing with it. So that's why I'm thinking that they're kind of the ones who started it. And then there's a spot where you can download the recipe and the label design, if you're going to distribute it in that way. And yeah, so it's a solid, as far as the beer is concerned.
It sounds like it's just upon the brewery to say, we're going to commit the profits to X style conversions, and
it still doesn't make any mention of whether or not it's.
I don't think there's any requirement of distribution. It just sounds like this brewery has a distribution lane. They're doing.
If you sell the beer, you donate from that beer.
You donate. You donate from the proceeds.
Okay,
that's so awesome.
As far as the beer is concerned. I'm not going to say it's anything super special. It's a solid imperial stout. Kind of tastes like what you would expect it to taste like. I would drink another one if it was put in front of me.
Cool.
Probably not this time of year. I'm a lot more likely to buy one of these come Christmas time.
Strange that we did this right in the dead of summer, but the cause is beautiful. The cause is beautiful,
and the timing is right for that. And I did see there was a couple of variations of it on the shelf.
See, I would drink
Market
this
of
in
Choice.
The spring or something,
there was also like one with an adjunct thing in it. It was like a barrel aged version or something.
Cool. I'm going to do some more digging on that because that really intrigues me.
But it's a good beer. It's a tasty beer.
Local breweries to jump on board with that.
I think we could convince local breweries to do that. I absolutely think we could take at least 3 to 4 that we all know of, and we could do that. And I think that'd be a rad step. So, well, to a brief history of dark beers, gentlemen, cheers. It is good to see you both.
It's good to be
to our listeners, cheers. All 7,000 of them. Welcome to Final Gravity. Delicious. It's actually very good.
It's really good.
It's very, very good.
I would definitely drink this in the spring and summer. Although definitely, like, I would be more than likely to drink this in like the fall. Like, I would love to see this around like harvest time.
Oh yeah,
that was just this the time of year to drink dark beers.
I can still get the urge to.
According to some, if we're going to keep making references to the past, it's dark beer season all year long, buddy.
I mean, drink the beer you want to drink. It's hot.
It is hot.
It's hot. And
I'm not saying you need to take a 6-pack of Guinness down the river with you or some like RIS like 12%er.
I almost bought RIS too today. But or KBS, excuse me.
Out camping with you, because that's just like summertime requires beer that you can drink a lot of and not pass out in the sun and die from heat stroke and sun poisoning.
This should be a session ale show, but we're not doing that. This should be a saison show, but it's hard to get saisons
we're gonna do
ale in Montana. Sour ale. Well,
we're going to do a session episode in like the dead of February.
Oh yeah. February is going to be session ale time. We're talking about dark beers. We're talking about dark beers. Who wants to lead us off?
I mean,
I guess the bigger question here is:
dead silence.
Did anyone do research on the history of dark beers going into this episode?
I came prepared for this episode. Did you all not?
I mean, I feel like I did some preparing, at least well enough to be able to get through this episode.
Well, I did some reading because we started off really basically, and we can diverge into other dark beers because there's a plethora of them. But we really started the tasting episode off with porters and stouts, and so. I will go ahead and lead in with I think the really interesting and unique history of England where porter was developed. We can certainly get into the boring monotony of water chemistry, which is why a lot of dark malts were used to balance the pH of brewing.
But see, that's the thing, though. I think the average, and even some of the more like moderate craft beer drinkers out there. Brewing water is the key ingredient. Like and we've had this conversation multiple times. There's like you can put the best grist and hop combination together and have all your timings right and have all the best, procedures and hit all your efficiencies and everything. But if your water's crap, your beer's going to come out like shit no matter what.
Brewing liquor is everything. I mean, it is the key ingredient. It's 90% of your beer, and it matters very much. But
I think a lot of people just forget to remember that, when they tasted these certain beers, that the reason that they were made is because they were designed 400 or 500 years ago.
London Porter was centered around the London aquifer, and that was a water that functioned a lot better at a lower acidity. It was because of the minerality of the water content, black malts and kilned malts were used to help buffer pH and create a better and more balanced beer for sure. It's also important to remember that at the time, this is pre-industrial revolution, that there was really, two ways of drying or kilning malts, and one was air dried and the other was over fire. And that fire could be anything from hay to coke, which is I just learned today, is a compressed, essentially fossil fuel. It's made from coal or oil being burned without oxygen. And you create a porous substance that can burn very hot, but with very low off-gassing or off-putting.
Interesting.
but you would have these kilned malts, and because that was part of the drying process. If you have green malt, it rots very quickly. It spoils very quickly. So like all grains, you dry it. So that was a process of doing it. And the fanciful tale, the always the very romantic tale of how porter came about is at the time you would go to a pub, and these were all cask conditioned ales at the time, or mostly cask conditioned ales. I won't say all. I can't prove that. But generally, the tavern keeper, the owner of the pub, was also kind of like a bartender in that they would make blends from casks to cask to create beers for their customers.
Yes.
So the initial brewer was always a blender, and they didn't have the knowledge.
I remember correctly, and not to cut you off, but I just if the knowledge, if the story you're telling is what I think it is that a porter was basically just a blend of all the dark beers that were.
Generally, a pour was called a thread, and if you had all of the threads, you had the whole butt or the entire butt, whatever the brewer could produce. And a porter was a specific, to the romantic tale, was a 3 threads blend of younger and lighter ale, moderately brown and more mature ale, and kind of almost what we would modernly consider spoiled ale. That was all blended into one to create a beer for London porters, who what porter refers to is a worker who's kind of a laborman, who's a strong guy who can haul groceries one way or the other, haul fish to the market, things like that. It's a basic labor, and they would go to these pubs and have the
port island. A porter is a port worker,
right?
Blender.
This blend was made for them. There is very little evidence to support that was the actual way it came about. However, there's a lot of evidence to support that was how English pubs worked at the time.
But those guys would get off work at the end of the day, and they would want a good, strong beer.
They would want a stronger, darker beer. The actual philosophy I read today, which I thought was really amazing, what they have proof of is that what probably happened is that a brewer looked at his entire selection of what he had in casks, all these different things, and kind of made the first melange, like mash of that. So he brewed a beer to replicate what it would be like if all these different things were poured.
Mm.
And that at the time, right, that at the time, thus creating a more efficient way to get that beer to the people that wanted it. And at the time, they had brown malt, which was essentially malt that had been dried, fire roasted or kilned to dry to a very far point, farther than they've ever really gone before, and to a point where you've kind of ruined a lot of the convertible sugars in it. You've maybe even got a little acridity to it, acidic taste, roast, things like that. So they'd use a high percentage of this very cheap malt and then mash it and then create this beverage that
buffering their pH with it to help with the water chemistry for the area and the aquifer.
But create this kind of roasty, aggressive, slightly acidic, still at the time very low alcohol, probably around 5% beer. That's a strong beer at the time. Or a strong-ish beer at the time that really they could sell for, very cheap to London porters, which is pretty fascinating.
Well, and interestingly, just the concept of how you were talking about them blending the different beers and everything, it also really harkens back to a lot of how scotches ended up coming about and happening and everything, was, blended scotch. Most scotches that you have are a blended scotch, where they're aging them in the different barrels and at different time frames, and they're blending these different combinations of these barrels came out a little bit hot, but this one's a little bit sweet, so if we blend those, we'll get a nice blended Scotch whiskey out of that. So that's something that people have been doing on that island for centuries and centuries and centuries. So I have to wonder if some of that, let's blend the things that are a little bit off by themselves together, comes out of that kind of tradition.
It's pretty amazing that, especially I'll speak for brewers, it's kind of revered now to be a blender. It's something that's very exotic and very technical, and also just art goes into it, science goes into it. But most crafts of the liquid form originally were blending operations because you were driving for consistency and there was so little known about what you were making.
I'm pretty sure that even
blend.
today that even as efficient as places like Anheuser-Busch or Miller Coors or fucking Sierra Nevada or any one of these other ones, you're still going to get variations in brews depending on who's brewing, who's doing what at what time, and you're still going to have to blend a little bit to continue to get the same consistency out of your beers. Is that not?
I think certainly some breweries blend for consistency. I wouldn't invoke the AB InBevs or even the Sierra Nevadas. And then I think their equipment is so fucking dialed. If you're a brewer, if you're a brewer and you're not hitting your mark, I mean, the other thing is a lot of those brewers are brewing multi batches, and so if you're off a couple Plato one direction, you shouldn't be off a couple Plato, but if you're off a few points one direction, you just try and make yourself either hit the mark the next time or be a little bit off the other direction, but. No, those guys are so good with their equipment. They're not blending that shit out. Now in brewing,
like even batch blending.
I mean, batch blending is one thing. But I mean that's post finished product. Exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. We're talking. I mean, when we refer to blending in this case, even in brewing now, but when obviously Josh talked about Scotch, a lot of times you're talking about post process blending, where you're taking one ingredient that has flavor A and another ingredient that has flavor B and maybe even another ingredient that has flavor C or another batch that has flavor of these propensities, and you're melding them together to either create a unique product or to create the same consistent product every time. And a lot of times with these pubs that were brewing dark beers in London, they were doing both. They were blending these cask ales to, a lot of times they were shelling out shitty ale by blending it 20% with good ale, but they were blending, acetic character and wild bacteria character, which obviously would have happened at that time in England, to cleaner beers to create a product that their clients liked. It was very much an off the cuff and quick process of you had to be as good as a modern cocktail bartender. This works with this works with this, boom, bang, bang. Here you go. Here's your beer. And the next beer he pours for another customer might be different, which is pretty incredible. They were working with batches of beer as if they were ingredients in a dish, like to its truest form. They were doing new things all the time. It was the Industrial Revolution and the invention.
It's like taking water, stock, and roux and making gravy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. At the height of the Industrial Revolution, and I think it was. Well, I know it was sometime in the 1700s, roasted malts were invented. And that changed the brewing perspective entirely. Another crazy fact, porter had become so big at that time. I mean, it was already in the United States. George Washington's favorite beer was a porter. And he had a select porter he actually stocked, which was amazing. Porter brewers, and I can't confirm this, but I read a fact that I can't disprove either, or I can't, not confirm. Porter brewing got so big in London and in England that these brewers built some of the biggest oak vats wooden vats we've ever seen. Nowadays we call them fooders, but there was a vat that held 28,000 U.S. barrels of liquid. A U.S. barrel is 31 gallons. So that's closing in on 750,000 gallons of liquid in an oak vat. Because here's the other amazing thing. Sorry to cut you off, Josh. The original porters were aged. They were very high hop beers, very heavily roasted beers, very, very intense flavors, and then they were mellowed by aging. And so to make that economy of scale, they built these giant wooden vats. One of them actually broke and flooded the streets of London with 750,000 gallons of porter. 8 people died by drowning.
Jesus.
I would have drowned from alcohol poisoning.
Actually, some of them alcohol poisoning from drinking. They said drinking out of the gutters, but a total of 8 people died.
I would have been one of those 8 people.
It's fucking crazy.
I think we would have been 3 of those 8 people. Be like, wait a minute. There's 750,000 gallons of beer on the ground.
Porter is not just a re-emerging style and a great beer style, but it was an economic revolution. It was its own micro revolution. It was so crazy.
And Ireland had the same explosion with stout. Did they not?
I don't know what came first, the Irish stout, but I believe the English stout came first. But I'm sure. I mean, Irish brewing obviously took to English dark beer very much so. I bet you there's some weird politics in that because obviously Ireland has been had an we'll just say had an interesting relationship with with Great Britain for a long time.
No. They
wait,
still
they
do
did?
that upper
Josh, do you know anything about that?
that upper western section that still
Maybe.
belongs to the fucking mainland.
Have you ever heard that? Have you ever spoken about the Queen before? Josh, tell us everything.
IRA stands for India Red Ale, right?
India Red Ale is exactly what
Irish
that stands
Republican
for.
Army.
Well, it's my understanding.
It's tough
as far
when you
as,
have a Scotsman and a fucking Republic of Ireland dude. Yeah, our ancestors probably fucking fought and tried to kill each other several times.
I mean, one of my
thing.
ancestors was locked up in a watchtower in one of the towns I visited in Scotland.
Hey, mine too.
And-
Not in London.
Well, yeah. No, there was in Aberdeen. There's this old historic building. This quick tangent here, but it's turned into a museum now. It used to be the Watchtower. It was the jail for a long time in this in Aberdeen. But up in one of the rooms in it, they have this recording playing where this dude had been jailed there. He was a tailor in town, and then he was caught supporting the Scottish revolutionaries against the crown, and he was imprisoned in here, and he wrote this whole poem or this whole anecdote thing about being imprisoned in his own town. And now they have a recording of his words being played in this room, in this museum. That guy was my ancestor. William Baird.
Holy shit.
I am a Baird.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So like I walk into this room and I hear this recording going on and I start reading it. I'm like, holy fuck. Like I am directly related to this dude that was locked in this room for opposing the crown.
Crazy.
There's and a continuing tangent. There's a similar story where an ancestor of mine, Red Hugh O'Donnell, was locked in the Tower of London for crimes against the crown.
Crazy.
Yep.
I don't know if any of my ancestors have ever been locked up for crimes against the crown, but I'll go with no just to be the counter argument for the moment.
But then again, we
Fair
also,
enough.
like I said, most of my ancestors fucking got bludgeoned to death by Vikings and Scotsmen that were trying to invade from.
Josh, y'all's folks
Sorry.
were just not so nice sometimes.
I mean, we definitely did our best, and we held our own county for a pretty long time. But
You're still here, so that counts for some.
Right.
Well, that's only because one of my ancestors decided to leave Ireland in 1864 when he was 14, and then, or whenever it was, and then join the fucking American Revolution.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think the beer history is going to be as exciting as that, but we should probably tangent back too.
Yeah. So
I don't know who
was gonna
bludgeoned
say,
who.
though, it's my understanding.
I just wanted to
Thomas, you
jump
brought
the
up
pond.
the Irish stout. It's my understanding that stouts were actually originally just strong porters.
Stout porter.
The word
yes.
stout because they were referred to as stout porters, and then
Stout
they
like
just
bull.
dropped the porter off, and now it's a stout.
Correct. Actually, stout was a reference for a while for any beer. You could call it a stout pale, and it just referenced a strong pale ale.
Strong pale, yeah.
But it
Interesting.
very quickly, more commonly, became associated with the porter. And this was also, again, Advent now coming into and maybe even post-Industrial Revolution, when brewing processes began to change and you could make more efficient beers, and you could make darker beers without using this stale malt or this old process, higher kilning and things like that, to create these roasted malts. You began to then experience brewers really changing and going after, because of the efficiency's sake, they could now make higher alcohol beers with the same amount of malt or less malt. And so they began to appeal to not the porters of London who could, pay what they could pay. They began to appealing to the aristocracy and really making beers for wealthy people.
I can just see the Irish brewers sitting around and being like, hey, it's been there for about an hour. Yeah, just fucking leave it. We'll get it in a bit. A 75-minute mash and a fucking hour and a half long Vorlov and then a 90-minute boil, and you've got 9% fucking dark, strong stout.
They started making more export beers and less beers for the people. You have the Baltic Porter, which was a cold lagered porter that came out that was a higher alcohol. You obviously have the Stout Porter, which we now call the Stout. And you began seeing export stouts, Irish stouts and things like that began to, kind of push both dryness and elevated flavor profiles and high alcohol. The Industrial Revolution did exactly to beer what it did to everything else. It made things cheaper to make, and therefore you wanted to make things you could charge more for people who could pay more for it, because you could do that now with your system.
I've always been impressed, as mediocre as a beer as Guinness is. I've always just been impressed how much body and mild amount of flavor they've been able to pack into like a 4.8% beer. Like, that always kind of intrigued me.
I don't want to slam them because they're revolutionary in what they've done for beer, but I remember loving Guinness as a kid. When I say kid, like, obviously to law enforcement, like, I mean, like 17, 18 years old. But it's not a good beer to me anymore. I can't respect the Guinness Irish Dressed. I mean, what we get over here, I have never had Guinness in Ireland, and I am told and believe it is a much different experience.
Yeah.
I believe that.
I can honestly say it is. So
what
much
you get
better
here
in
now in
Ireland.
the can with the little widget, the nitro widget, it just feels so flat and not fun to me.
No.
When I think of a stout, when I think of any dark beer, I think of the artisanship of malting, and I think of the flavor. You can get so much from dark beer. You can really.
Well, they serve them too. They actually let the beer before they actually serve it to you, and this is coming secondhand from, pardon me, my father, who has been to Ireland several times and purposely ordered Guinness off the taps, and before they even serve it to you, they'll let it sit, or grab a previously poured one that's been out for a minute or two, so that it's actually come up in temperature a little bit.
See, I didn't have that experience.
Oh, no?
No. So what I found, the one night I spent in Ireland, and then the whole time I was in Scotland, Guinness between Ireland and Scotland was a pretty similar experience, which in general was better than here in the U.S. And so unless the places I was going just didn't learn to do that, it was usually just poured and brought to you in a similar style as a nitro, which might be where that comes from, is a lot of people don't realize that a nitro beer, a lot of times you'll pour it on tap and let it sit and wait for those nitro bubbles to calm down and then pour some more. So they kind of think it's sitting for a long time, when really that's just how you pour a nitro beer, which Guinness is generally on their nitro taps over there anymore.
One day we'll talk about how Americans pour their beer all wrong. If you go to any of these countries, Germany, Ireland, like they take very good care of pouring the beer. They allow the beer to rest for a little bit. They allow the beer to open up. They treat it, like Americans have always treated wine. They treat it like it's an experience. And if you have to wait 2.5 minutes for your beer to get to you, that's just what you have to fucking do.
Yeah, and as a
that's just kind of standard European experience,
right? Exactly.
and as a
Take
newly
a deep breath.
Cicerone certified beer server, it even tells you pour it till it's 2/3 full, and then you let it rest for about 30 to 45 seconds. You pour the rest through the middle, let the head build up, and let that sit for another 30 to 45 seconds.
That's the American layered pour, and it's a great pour. It's a great pour.
You bring it over to the table.
Yeah.
But when I'm in the middle of a fucking busy ass Saturday night dinner service and I've got 7 tickets going on my wheel, I'm not letting beer rest. I'm pouring it and putting it on a fucking tray to go to the service.
And that's the way that we're all doing it, and that's the hard thing, because we just don't. We grew up with a very different ethos in America toward everything. Shifting back to it, but still keeping onto that track of ethos. Like, one of the amazing things about porter was one of those styles that when we were still trading with England before the Revolutionary War, porter was in high demand over here in America. And once the trade was shut off, I believe via the Boston Tea Party, correct me if I'm wrong on that one. And I'm sure maybe trade was shut off before then, but it was something along those lines.
I'm sure it had something to do with that event.
And so American breweries began taking up the brewing of porter, and later stout. And it was porter was certainly eventually eclipsed by the bringing of German style beers, pilsners, to our I won't say our great nation, to our piece of land that we took.
To this chunk of earth that's sticking out of the water.
But in terms of European style dark beers, obviously porters and stouts do kind of reign supreme in the conversation. There are some other different things like German Schwarzbier and things like that, but largely when you look at regionality of the brewing of dark beers, it comes from the aquifer, and it came from the technology at hand, which I think is really fascinating.
Belgian doubles, Belgian quads, some Trappist beers are are all on the darker, ambery, browner
Yeah.
side of things.
I think a lot of those traditionally, though, those came from the color came from sugar rather than malt. And I could be double checked on that. Our listeners, shameless plug, get in that book.
Get that book.
Read that book. I mean, it's
I'm
not
pretty
really a
sure
shameless plug. It's not like we benefit from our listeners getting that book. We're not
right, exactly. We don't.
We're only getting
actually.
$1,000 donations from the listeners.
I know. Josh and I's booking
I don't
agent
get
has not
paid
got
at
us a
all,
sponsorship
so-
from the Oxford Companion of Beer. I'm pretty sure that Belgian dark beers, largely their color was derived from either Maillard reactions in the kettle traditionally, or Maillard reactions involving invert sugar. And again, I could be fact checked on that for sure. Also, fun fact as we talk about dark beers, and this is a dark style beer, the Belgian Quad is not actually a traditional style. The Belgian Quad is an Americanization of a style. That would just be called a Trappist ale, and it'd be a very boutique ale, or maybe it'd be listed by a vintage or by the brewery itself and just called its house ale.
Unless you're a monk in a monastery, it's not Trappist.
Right, exactly. But you don't see.
But the idea, you can. I did a little reading on that too, and the closest you can do is like Trappist style ale, but you can't actually label it as a Trappist ale.
And good form.
Yeah,
it's like champagne. You can't make champagne unless it's in Champagne, France. That's just what it is. And they have every right to defend their tradition.
It's like a Scotch is from Scotland.
Yeah, exactly.
Period.
Exactly.
You can whiskey is just a whore.
You can do Scotch style whiskeys. I mean, there's some. Honestly, I'm stoked on that. There's some Americans making some very dope whiskeys. But yeah,
you can make a dope single malt
every
whiskey.
right to defend their tradition.
Scotch unless you're in Scotland.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, obviously, dark ales now, modern wise, like you can get anything. I mean, there's a wild, black IPA Cascadian dark trend that's kind of fizzled out now, but barrel aged stouts, imperial stouts,
so
and
many
things
times
like that.
to make a black IPA, it just does not work.
I will say on the subject of European dark ales, the second beer I'm drinking right now is from a brewery in the Netherlands.
Oh, tell us about it.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
It's from I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of this because I don't speak Dutch or whatever language they speak in the Netherlands. I think it's Dutch.
I
but
it's
Dutch.
I think it's actually just pronounced Brewery de Molen. I'll just hold it up to the camera there for anyone watching
probably,
on YouTube. But
brewery followed by city name.
It is a dark ale brewed with coffee, unfiltered. It says to enjoy within 5 years, keep cool and dark. And it actually has an ingredients list on it, which I feel like you guys might find a little interesting. Ingredients: water.
I like the fact that it says drink within 5 years.
Yeah,
pretty dope.
The ingredients
shelf
list:
life.
Water, pale, brown, cara, and roasted barley malts. Premiant, which is a bittering hop. Coffee, wild mocha, and yeast. Top fermenting.
What were those? What was that grist breakdown?
Pale, brown, cara, and roasted barley malts. It's like 11.6%. It's EBC 268 and 86 EBU, which I don't know what either of those things are. I think it's a European thing, maybe.
It's probably bitter units, but they probably don't.
EBC is an international coloring unit, and EBU is an international bittering unit that's slightly different than IBU. Yeah, different formulas.
Okay. But it is delicious. It kind of tastes like I'm drinking a glass of coffee right now, which is fantastic.
Yeah, let's see the color on that. Hold that up for me, Josh.
Oscar, good grief, dude.
That's dark. Looks like it's
really.
Looks like it might be bottle conditioned, or is it got a pretty effervescence to it? It looks like it's kind of sparkly.
Well, it says enjoy within 5 years, and then the stamp on it says
that's
13th of January 2021. Yeah. So I think it's been bottle conditioned for about 4 years before they put it on the shelf.
Your palate? Is it pretty bubbly? Is it pretty crisp?
It's got a nice little bite to it. It's a little flat, but that might just be my elevation up here.
Okay, that could also just be maybe they want you to hold on to that bottle for a fuckload of a second.
Yeah. I mean, it's good though.
That would be a fun one to throw in your cellar and forget. Well, don't throw, but gently place in your cellar and forget that you have for a while, and then like one day you're just like, oh yeah, wonder how this.
But also,
is doing now.
They say the Plato on the bottle too. It's 23.7 degree Plato.
I love European beers for that reason. They're just so frank with that
That's
shit.
a big fucking beer.
That is
Yeah.
beer.
Well, and like the label's so simple. It just gives you like basic information.
Words and lines.
Yep. No, it's
Although
a dope beer, and it's probably the first beer I've ever had from the Netherlands. So
what's
got
the
that going for
ABV on
too.
it?
11.7?
11.6.
6, excuse me.
Yeah.
Whatever the fuck this is. Thank you for bringing that over.
1050.
I haven't yet tried it, but all I saw was that it was 12.9, and I got kind of excited.
What do you guys got over there?
Oscar Blues 1050 barrel-aged imperial stout. It is Oscar Blues is when we sometimes talk about key breweries or Godfather beers. Oscar Blues is a long staple of just great packaged beer and great stuff. But the 1050 is their barrel-aged imperial stout, and it is everything you want from a big, chewy American imperial stout.
Oh yeah, a little bit of cookie, a little bit of chocolate, a little bit of coffee
to it. I like that descriptor. I got a fuckload of cookie off it right off the bat.
It's like chocolate chip cookie, coffee.
I get coconut too.
Coconut, a little sprinkle of vanilla. I get some dark red fruit. This is fucking delicious. Thank you.
Chocolate chip
Oscar.
cookie dough or like cooked chocolate chip cookie?
Thank you for making that distinction, because I get laughed at sometimes when I make the distinction between unprocessed or processed flavors. I've used the term unbaked apple pie before and gotten some serious flack, which I think is a fabulous.
No, there's a huge difference.
But there's a huge difference.
No. I definitely think this is fresh out of the oven chocolate chip cookie. It's got like a little.
Cool.
It's got like that roasty, crispy sugar, like that.
It's got burnt sugar to it.
Yeah,
it's
like
got
that
caramelized sugar.
that crunchy outer shell of like the cookie.
That gooey inside.
That's pretty much it's what this describes. It's like a fresh out of the oven chocolate chip cookie.
There's definitely a little bit of that cherry varnish that comes from high alcohol beers, no matter what you do, and it's not offensive here at all.
No,
I think that's
it's very well balanced. Like if you were to add like vanilla extract or like cherry extract, just a little drop to your dough before you bake them.
Good beer, so I'm happy to be sipping it.
And it's not chewy. You know what I mean? It's not like you sit there and you're like.
I get a little viscosity. I mean, it's not thick, but I get a little. I mean, I certainly know that it finished higher than 3 Plato. I get a little viscosity from this for sure.
Doesn't have you licking the top of your mouth like a dog with peanut butter?
No, it does not have me doing that.
No,
somebody at a truck stop bathroom had me doing that the other day, but that's a whole different story for a whole different time.
And the peanut butter was not in his mouth.
No, there was no peanut butter. There wasn't peanut butter.
It was dry. No peanut butter at all.
Man, I feel like you got bamboozled here. No peanut butter. Which, speaking of things that are situations that don't belong with peanut butter in them, beer it being one of them, especially dark beers. Stop trying to make peanut butter porters. Peanuts and butter shouldn't be near beer, as per conversations that CJ and I have had in the past. I get why you guys want to do it. Sure, it sounds like it tastes delicious, but I have yet to have a very well-rounded peanut butter porter that I don't want to like throw away.
Well, I'll cue into that and say that as we talk about both the history of dark beer and maybe some theories about dark beer, I'll go ahead and give mine on that very same topic, because we have had that conversation. Dark beer to me evokes notes of everything ranging from caramel to biscuit to nutty to fruity to chocolatey to coffee to roast to burnt to ashy to campfire smoke. You have, when you're making a dark beer, when anyone's making a dark beer, you have a melange, a cornucopia, a fucking smorgasbord of ingredients at your hands. There's really nothing off the table. I really believe that. When you're making good dark beer, whether it be a simple porter or a strong Russian Imperial Stout, or a Belgian Quad, or a Belgian Debelle is even a better example of a nice strong dark beer. You have a range of ingredients at your fingertips, and you shouldn't rely on artificial or gimmicky ideas to get there.
No, there's a way to
you
put
can make a stout
together.
or a porter taste like peanut butter without reaching for the jar of Jiffy. It does take a little more work. It does take a little more work on the taster to dig those notes out, to really dig into the glass and say, why does this make me so happy? I think it's important especially going to American breweries now, I think that we've come up with this mantra that dark beers have to be sweet, and I think that historically you're proven wrong every time. There, dark beers were dry. They were oftentimes served in the presence and brewed in the presence of lactobacillus and wild bacteria, which would have dried them out and even made them slightly acidic.
Slightly sour.
Yeah. You can take, gosh, look at the range of just sheer malts that we have today with modern technology. Why would you stray away from that in favor of an adjunct that doesn't necessarily make the beer better? It just makes the beer easier. Dark beers were never meant to be easy. They were meant to be the beers of
pat
kings.
Myself on the back or anything, but in the 4 short years of homebrewing and the 50 some odd batches of beer that I have made, I think I have used like 3 adjuncts, and it was cacao nibs on secondary, coffee, and crushed hazelnuts. But other than that, I've never used like extracts or coconut or like any. Because you and I have had a conversation where the complexity of the beer can be built with the ingredients that we have at hand without having to grab for a dosing jar or a fucking dozen jelly donuts to get your beer to taste like that. There's a way to get what you want out of the beer with the ingredients that are available to you.
Sure.
I would really love to try a porter I would love to try a porter that someone built as a peanut butter porter without using peanut butter.
Me too. I
absolutely
think it's
love
out
to try
there.
that.
I honestly think it's out there.
It's gonna take a couple of fucked up beers to figure it out.
I think
get ratios right.
I think our 7 listeners have learned that from me that I'll go on a rant, and I don't care whatever you do as long as you make good product. But I far more respect the people that put the work in. It's easy to buy a chemical compound. It's easy to take the easy way out. Dark beers were never about taking the easy way out. If you look at the history of them, they were some of the most complex beers being made at that time because they were being made for individuals, not for groups of people. They were being blended on the site for individuals.
Charlie's here again. Pour him one.
Yeah. They were taking
CJ's
most
here. Pour him his blend.
Right. They were taking the most modern techniques they had and making the most complex beers they could. And obviously imagining this in my head. But it's kind of a shame that it's now come modern wise to, dark beers are just big, sweet, and usually flavored.
Have an English brown ale.
I like a Kentucky breakfast stout as much as the next person. But at the end of the day, we can all grab the same jar and put the same bullshit into the same liquid. It takes a really great human being and brewer to say, I'm going to investigate my ingredients and I'm going to put flavors together and it's a two-way street. When you taste beer that was brewed by somebody and you want to find the flavors in them, you have to search for them. They're not going to be in your face. If they're made with natural ingredients and they're made well and they're balanced, it's not just going to scream peanut butter as it comes out of the glass.
It's like drinking a good wine.
I want to make, and I want to make it very clear to people that hazelnut syrups and coffee additives that you put into your coffee, hazelnut tastes nothing like that flavor that they put into those jars.
Most natural flavors don't.
It tastes nowhere even close to what that syrupy shit that they put into your coffee is. I wasn't looking for that sweet hazelnutty flavor in my beer to begin with, but I wanted something more complex than using peanuts or almonds or cashews or something of that to that effect. So I was like, why not actually use the actual hazelnut? And it provides a very round, balanced fucking nut flavor in a beer if that's what you're going for, especially in like an English brown or.
Which pro tip that we learned from that experience too, if you want a hazelnut coffee, instead of going and buying the blend that has the sugary hazelnut additive to it, if you grind your own coffee at home, just toss a hazelnut in there while you're grinding it. Grind it with your coffee, let that steep in the French press. Fuck.
Yeah, is that the way to do it?
Throw a single hazelnut in with your fucking 3 teaspoons of fucking coffee in the morning.
Interesting.
And fucking let that blend and let that fucking strain through. That is a really good cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to hammer the point that we're going at home now, as we sway from the history to just more of talking about dark beers in general, flavor in general, is that I read an article a long time ago as I was researching hops, and I'm sure I'm going to embellish the numbers a little bit, but there is like 5,000 flavor and aroma compounds that you sense when you walk through a field of roses. 5,000 compounds. Identifiable compounds.
Wow.
There's about 5. And again, I'm going more for the ratio than the actual numbers, so someone can fact check me and find it wrong, whatever. But there's about 5 you get when you smell a rose perfume. And yet, blind, most human beings will choose the 5 compound over the 5,000. So I think that really indicates to us that we have a pretty limited perception of what's happening. We have a long way to go as tasters and appreciators because if you really want to taste something, if you really want to know what's going on in there and not have it easy for you, you got to get in there and you got to fucking taste it. You got to fucking work on it.
You have to, yeah.
It's a two-way street between the brewer of dark beers and the taster of dark beers to really get it out there. And you'll know if they put peanut butter extract in it. You'll smell it right away. But what you should be doing is working past that. Hopefully it's not even there and getting into what's in the glass because that really is where the artist lies.
I mean, there's a reason there are professional wine tasters and whiskey tasters and beer tasters. Not anyone can just go up, smell a glass, and pick out the notes, taste it, and pick out the flavors. You have to try for it.
Agreed.
I'm working on it.
But the more you try for it and the more you work on that, the more you can enjoy it for what it is and really appreciate the art in what goes into making it.
Amen.
Yeah, I can't disagree with any bit of that.
In summary, pay attention to your product. If you want better product, learn to love your product as much as you can. And dark beers, at least especially in England, helped fuel an industrial revolution and a whole new economic scale of what brewing could be. Cheers.
You're here.
Shout out to the Irish, real quick, just because
Josh is right here, man. He's right here.
Whatever, dude. Scotland is part of fucking England. It's all part of the UK. Except for
yeah, but we fucking tried hard not to be.
Yeah, you guys have never been that united. No disrespect.
Yeah, you guys keep trying to get away, but they just won't let you leave.
Oh, they won't.
All right, Jess.
Oh, there's a bad joke in there somewhere.
No, we're passing on it today. Nope, we're not doing that.
We're not.
doing it
We're
today.
definitely
being
not
very
doing
serious.
that today. Are we gonna cap this episode here?
I feel good. I brought all that I
feel
have.
like we're at
Another shameless plug. Oxford Beer Companion. They'll tell you everything you know.
Go get yourself Tasting Beer. It's another book. Another good book to listen to.
You should hold it right
Definitely.
side up at least once this episode.
I don't have the cover jacket on it, so there's no title
but-
on there.
But
Yeah,
it's
there you
on
go.
the spine.
Oh, sorry. Oh, this way, right side up? Or you want this way? Which way is right
You
side up
kept
to you?
holding it with beer upside down. The word beer was upside down. Yeah, like that. There you go. Now, every time you held it up, the word beer was upside down.
Guys,
Like this.
I don't understand certain
Go get
things.
this book.
I don't understand certain
The
things.
Oxford Companion
I don't
to
understand
Beer.
certain things. I don't get
Yeah,
it.
it's fair.
Go look for the book Tasting Beer. Check out.
I live in a mirror.
Even if you don't want to be a cicerone, go check out the courses that they have to educate yourself on the different styles of beer from U.S. to Irish, UK to Belgium to Germany, and to Czech beers. It's a great. Again, we are not getting paid for any of this. I'm just shamelessly plugging because it's a good way to learn.
Josh and I
Isn't it? Yeah, CJ.
Josh and I have been getting paid quite
it's
a bit.
a good
actually.
way to
We're doing
learn.
very
It's
well.
a good way to learn about beer. And
It
for
is.
if you're going to spend $30 on a beer book, it may as well be one of the Cicerone books about beer by region.
Or just drink a lot. You know, that's what I did. And
I mean,
look at me now, Dad.
When you're drinking it, take an extra minute to think about it. Instead of just chugging it down, just think about the beer that you're drinking.
Amen. Amen to that. The man of wisdom, Viking Peaches, always with the shortest, simplest, and most brilliant answer.
The Groovy Bear, who makes it
Educational.
always a good time and very educational. And me,
and
who
Cousin T, who doesn't get paid for any of this.
who doesn't apparently
Not getting paid.
because I bring all the gear. You guys, right?
He's not getting paid for this.
This is
not.
It's a sound guy thing. We don't get paid enough for what we do. Anyway, I'm gonna turn y'all down, and I'm gonna turn up some 20 grand and let them
20 grand.
little funk penitentiary close us out for the evening. Thank you, 7 listeners. Final Gravity closing out.
Black Lives Matter.
Black 4, Plato 2, Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, Kids Lives Matter, our president's a clown, our candidates are assholes, this country's fucked. Time to burn it down.
The funk is calling, the venue's unique. We got about the sounds down from the Good Creek. We starting to rip, and I'm starting to rage. Cause at the set break, I be sipping backstage. A little bit of whiskey, some IPA. But in the background, while I hear the OJs, you know what that mean? Warden pulling in the reins. He keeps a tight ship, we looser than chains. Me, I'm gonna dip, my boy rolled up a heater.
Come on, you better pack up that speaker.
Sorry, Warden sir, I forgot about the key. Rapping chords to unlock funk penitentiary. So we'll do the work while you have the fun. We got the platform, can't leave until it's done. We'll keep it fresh if you don't get stale. Wait for us in the end. I'm about to post